Hello and welcome to Soap Goes to the Oscars. This is episode 125. I'm recording on November 15th, 2025. And I finished the movie in the wee hours of this morning. I started it Friday evening, fell asleep for a bit in the middle, but I'd had some tea before that. So then when I decided to finally go to bed around 1, I was awake. So I just watched it on my phone to finish it, which I discovered, watching it on my phone kind of prevents me from being on my phone. So at least maybe with some of these older movies, I might just do that. And it helps me stay focused on the movie instead of just the phone, being on other things on the phone. Anyway, I said phone a lot there. So this movie was called King's Row, and I watched it on Tubi, which was another reason why it took longer. It's one of the longer movies, it's hour and or 2 hours and 7 minutes. And with Tubi, they had quite a few commercials, so it extended the time even further. But it was free, so I will take it. So far, $0 for this round. And I don't remember now if I said the name of the movie. I think I did. So King's Row is a 1942 film starring Ann Sheridan, Robert Cummings, Ronald Reagan, and Betty Field that tells the story of a young couple growing up in a small American town at the turn of the 20th century. Picture was directed by Sam Wood. Film was adapted by Casey Robinson from a best-selling 1940 novel of the same name by Henry Belleman. Musical score was composed by Eric Wolfgang Korngold, and the cinematographer was James Wong Howe. Supporting cast features Charles Coburn, Claude Rains, Judith Anderson, Maria Ouspenskaya. She was nominated, maybe won supporting actress in Love Affair. Edited by Ralph Dawson, produced and distributed by Warner Brothers, released February 2nd, 1942, with a runtime of 127 minutes. This was nominated for Best Cinematography, Black and White, Best Director, and Best Picture. So I'll just read the beginning of the plot here. In the small Midwestern town of Kings Row, 5 children grow up together in the 1890s. Paris Mitchell, a polite, clever little boy who lives with his grandmother, pretty blonde Cassandra Tower, daughter of the secretive Dr. Alexander Tower, and a mother that is seen only through the upstairs window. The orphan but wealthy and fun-loving Drake McHugh, who is best friends with Paris. Louise Gordon, daughter of the town physician, Dr. Henry Gordon, and the tomboy Randy Monahan from the wrong side of the tracks, whose father, Tom, is a railroad worker. The Hays Code, a film adaptation of Belleman's controversial novel modeled on his hometown of Fulton, Missouri, presented significant problems for movie industry censors who sought to bring the film into conformity with the Hays Code. Screenwriter Casey Robinson believed the project was hopeless because of the code. Producer Hal B. Wallace said that Robinson felt I was crazy to have bought so downbeat a property. Wallace urged him to reconsider, and Robinson realized that he could turn this into a story of an idealistic young doctor challenged by the realities of a cruel and horrifying world. Boy, howdy. Joseph Breen, director of the Production Code Authority, which administered the Hays Code, wrote the producers that to attempt to translate such a story to the screen, even though it be rewritten to conform to the provisions of the production code, is, in our judgment, a very questionable undertaking from the standpoint of the good and welfare of this industry. 20th Century Fox originally sought to buy Belleman's novel as a vehicle for Henry Fonda. Philip Reed, Rex Downing, and Tyrone Power were considered for the role of Paris. In April 1941, Robert Cummings was mentioned as the leading favorite if power could not be borrowed. Cummings did a screen test and by May had the role. Cummings was tied up filming a Deanna Durbin film, but the filmmakers were willing to postpone shooting for him. In September, filming was shut down for a week as Cummings was recalled to do reshoots on the Durbin film. Ida Lupino, Olivia de Havilland, and Ginger Rogers were initially considered for the role of Cassandra. Director Sam Wood pushed hard to cast Lupino, saying that she has a natural something that Cassie should have. Wood believed that de Havilland, who refused the role, was too mature for the part. Lupino also refused it despite Wallace's emphatic arguments, saying that it was beneath her as an artist. Bette Davis wanted the part, but the studio was against it because they believed that she would dominate the movie. Davis later suggested Betty Field. Among the other actresses considered for Cassandra were Katharine Hepburn, Adele Longmire, Marsha Hunt, Lorraine Day, Susan Peters, Joan Leslie, Jean Tierney, and Priscilla Lane. James Stevenson was originally cast as Dr. Tower, but died and was replaced by Claude Rains. Claude Rains was kind of a weird casting in a very small part. Before Ronald Reagan was cast, the studio considered John Garfield for the role of Drake McHugh. So were Dennis Morgan, Eddie Albert, Robert Preston, and Franchot Tone. Although Reagan became a star as the result of his performance, he was unable to capitalize on his success because he was drafted into the U.S. Army to serve in World War II. He never regained the star status that he had achieved from his performance in the film. I did not know that. Okay, so let's look at I just wrote a brief review in Letterboxd. I gave it 3 stars in the end. I was leaning towards 2.5 for a lot of the movie, but then in the end, I gave it 3. I just said this movie was batshit crazy. Had me at the beginning, lost me in the middle, and brought me back at the end. Not perfect by any stretch, far too dramatic at times, but wasn't bad. So this movie was way overacted, especially by the female actors and a little bit by Reagan. Robert Cummings, who played Paris, was probably the most understated performance. He was really kind of genuine in the role, and it was somewhat annoying at times because we're getting to a point where, I've talked about before that one thing I don't like about the older movies is the sort of unnaturalness of them. Film came from stage, and in stage you sort of have to overact a little bit, and they were still doing that on film at the beginning, and especially when it was silent movies, you still had to overact a little bit, but that still carried into when sound was added, and I don't love it all the time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I don't love it. And we're getting to a time where that's sort of disappearing in these movies that I'm watching. This started in 1927. I'm in 1942 now, 15 years later. So sort of a more natural acting is coming about. Now, this movie is set 40 to 50 years before it was filmed. So maybe they were sort of hearkening back to that time, but there was a lot of overacting in this. The most subtle performances were Robert Cummings and Claude Rains and some of the other side characters, but the main actors and actresses, or the main actresses mostly, and Reagan, were very over the top at times. And not just over the top, but also kind of bad in places. But this movie was crazy. I'm going to spoil a little bit so you can skip if you don't want to know. But it started out, they're kids, and then it pretty quickly, it cuts to them being, out of high school, probably 18, 19. And, Paris wants to be a doctor. He was in love with Cassandra when they were little, but her father, played by Claude Rains, hid her away. Like, she had a birthday party and nobody came, and she was upset. And apparently later you sort of find out that the mother had some mental issues. And so he started seeing those signs in his daughter. So he hid her away. So from that point on until they're grown up, Harris has never seen this girl again. And he's going to become a doctor. And so he goes to kind of study with this guy before he goes to school because he's a doctor. And so he gets to meet up with Cassandra again, Cassie. Then, like, before he leaves for school, Cassie is poisoned and the father kills himself. And I don't know if they changed that at all. Like, it was kind of unclear to me if she was poisoned and he killed himself, like he poisoned her and then killed himself, or if she killed him and then poisoned herself. I don't know. But and if it was more explicit in the movie, I missed it. But crazy, batshit crazy. And then, like, later, Reagan is working in he has all these big dreams. Drake McHugh, he has all these big dreams, and they sort of fall apart. But he's in love with the tomboy that they grew up with, Randy, and he gets a job from her father at the train yard, and there's an accident, and he has to have, they say that he was run over by the train, and the town doctor amputates his legs. You come to find out at the end of this movie that the town doctor's daughter was in love with Drake, played by Reagan, and he cut his legs off basically to cripple him so that his daughter wouldn't be interested, or that Drake wouldn't be interested, would kind of punish him because his daughter was in love with him. He didn't need to have his legs amputated. He didn't even get run over by the train. He was just kind of pinched in between the train and something. And then, and if you think back to the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where a little boy, his father is being operated on by this doctor, and he's crying, and you hear the person being operated on screaming, and the other kids are like, "Why didn't they give him chloroform?" And he's like, "Oh, well, the doctor said my father has a bad heart, so he can't give him chloroform." So he's performing an operation. He had ulcers on his legs being removed. He's performing an operation with no sedative or anything, and so you come to find out that this guy has been doing this his whole career, like basically punishing people that he thinks are bad or whatever by doing unnecessary surgeries or not giving them sedative during surgery. This movie was crazy. It was crazy. 1942. What the hell? People talk about movies being depraved now. Like, I'm surprised some of this other stuff. The Hays Code was mostly about sex. Let's be honest. Violence and stuff they still get away with a little bit, but it's always about sex. But this movie's crazy. This movie was crazy. And it sort of, and I don't know if it was just because I was watching on my phone the last bit, and so I was paying more attention, that I was more focused on it and enjoyed it a little more. But oh man, it was a roller coaster and just cuckoo banana pants. So in the end, I did like it. It wasn't the best. Sort of in line with the other movies this round. I think I gave Pride of the Yankees a 4, Yankee Doodle Dandy a 4.5, Pied Piper 3.5, and I gave King's Row and Random Harvest 3. So average this round so far 3.6. Average for the 1940 so far 3.3. They go up. I made some new pivot tables in my spreadsheet here. So average for the 1920s was 3. Average for the 1930s was 3.1. Average for the 1940s so far 3.3. I also broke it down by year, but I won't go into that. And the other thing you may have noticed is, and this will, by the time you hear this, they will have been there for a long time, but Libsyn, the podcast host that I use, started offering like ads to be way back when Rich and I started this podcast. I tried to get ads in it to monetize it in some way, but they said you needed like 10,000 downloads a month, which we, haven't even had 10,000 downloads in over 10 years. So, but now they started offering it. In addition to that, they started offering something where you can have like a second podcast will show up and people have my podcast followed. A second episode of something else will pop up and say, you may also like On Purpose with Jay Shetty. It'll be under my brand, but it'll be like a clip of their podcast to try to get you to listen to there. So I made 11 cents from that last month. So we'll see how the advertising goes as well. But anyway, sorry for all that. And remember, you can find us on Apple Music or Spotify. Check us out on Instagram under Movie Stubs 4. And that's all I got. See you next time.